Hey there, this is Linda Bartolucci and I own inkstampandscrap.com, and today we're going to use all these products to put together a beautiful card to showcase the Happiness Abounds stamp set, and I'm going to show you a really easy way to color in these gorgeous flowers. So let's get to it. Okay, so the Happiness Abounds stamp set is actually a bundle. It actually works with some dies, so let me share those with you. Here are the beautiful dies that work with it. For this card, we are not going to use any of these dies, but in future parts of this series, we are going to use them. What I did take the liberty of doing, and these got a little bit smashed in here, but we're still going to be able to work with them just fine, is make these really easy to use coloring templates out of vellum cardstock. So I took the outline of all the flowers that I'm going to use and the leaves, and I just die cut them in vellum cardstock. And then we're going to use this like a stencil to do our coloring. So let's get to that. The colors that we're going to use today are Orchid Oasis, Parakeet Party, Sweet Sorbet, and then we're going to use our blending brushes along with the die set here. I already cut out the second largest die from this die set. We're going to use the Adhesive-Backed Hexagons that are in the mini catalog, which is available until the end of June. We're going to use a sheet of Orchid Oasis cardstock and a sheet of basic white cardstock. All of these items are listed in your handy download that you can print off. It's linked below this video, and it's also linked in the blog post associated with this video. You can print it off and follow along. All the products are listed along with a picture of the finished card. While I am making the card, I will go through all the dimensions, and obviously you'll see the step-by-step process. So if you want to take some notes, that's what that's for. First thing we're going to do is get our cardstock prepared. So I'm going to score the basic white at 5.5. And then I am going to use my Stampin' Trimmer. Then I'm going to use my Stampin' Trimmer and cut this at 4 1/4 on the 8.5 edge. There we go. Now I have two cards. I'm going to fold this one. Use my bone folder to crease the score, or burnish the score, sorry. There we go. And then we can use this as a second card, and I can also use it for some scrap. For the Orchid Oasis, I just want this to be 4 1/4 by, or excuse me, 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm going to cut it on the long side at 4 and the short side at 5 1/4. This will maximize the amount of scrap I have left from that piece of cardstock. We're going to set that aside to assemble with the rest of the card in a moment. So I have my card base, 11 by 4 1/4. I have my first layer of the Orchid Oasis, which is 4 by 5 1/4. And then I have a half sheet of basic white left over. All I need to do is cut my second layer out of this. I'm just going to cut it right below the score line, so I missed that, so I can use this. It's larger than I need it to be, but that's okay because I'd like to stamp the flowers around liberally and then make my decision as to what portion of the layer I'm going to use. All right, we're going to put that cardstock on some grid paper, and now I am going to take the stamps that I want to use along with those vellum templates that I made. First, we're going to stamp the flowers around, and then we'll use the vellum templates to color them in. So I'm going to start with the largest flower, and I am using Tuxedo Black Memento ink to color this. Move this down a little bit. There we go. I think I might be in need of a new ink pad. There we go. So I'm going to do some off and some completely on the cardstock. I just want to kind of randomly stamp them, and since I want to use a few of the images. I don't want to overload my cardstock with images yet. I'm going to use the smaller rows to fill in a bit. It also doesn't need to be so congested that every bit of white is taken over. And then the last thing I'm going to do is fill with my leaves. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of fill in here. Twisting my leaves around a little bit just to add a little bit of interest to the card, and that's it. Yeah, there's some larger spaces of white, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that so that when I do the coloring, everything will come out fine. I'm going to switch to the greeting while I let this ink set up. The only reason I'm switching is because it's a little humid down here today, and I want to make sure that it's completely dry before I start using my blending brushes and coloring it. So I grabbed the Wishing You All the Happiness You Can Imagine stamp. I'm just going to set it down on my grid paper, and then I'm going to bring my block down on it. Just to get it pretty straight, just makes things a little easier. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now what I'm going to do is line my grid paper up with the lines on the grid, line my hexagon up with the lines on the grid paper, and then I am going to try and make this as straight as possible. Kind of looking at the two edges of the word happiness, those little curly cues, and making sure they're in about the same place. Looking at the top and bottom of the stamp, it looks pretty straight. And there we go. All right, I am happy with that. So now, just like the black, we're gonna let that set up for a couple of minutes before I put any embellishments on it. And while we're waiting for that to dry, we can color our flowers. So let's bring this back in. I'm going to do the larger flowers first. So again, all I did was take the dies that match this and cut them out on vellum cardstock in order to make stencils for myself. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take the vellum cardstock stencils that I created using the dies that go with this set, and I'm going to just get the heaviest part of the ink off over on this scratch paper, and then I'm going to gently go around and just lightly color in these flowers. A couple things you want to consider. You don't want to go off the edge of the vellum because then it'll get on the white of your card base. You want to make sure, if you're having difficulty lining up the stencil, consider that you might have it upside down. I think I am going to go back and mark top on these to make sure that I know which direction these stencils go, just to help myself out a little bit. And then once we finish the three larger flowers, I can move on to the smaller ones. Let's see here. Oops, why does that keep moving? Aha, there we go. Even the best laid plans. All right, I want to make sure. I find I can get more ink on the blending brush if I just kind of tap it, especially since I am holding my hand down here. I don't want this to move, so I'm gonna hold it here. And then just lightly get this one too. There we go. All right, and because that die is the exact shape of the flower, that makes it super easy to color it in. So let's move on to the sweet sorbet. I kind of want to call it strawberry sorbet, but it's sweet sorbet. It looks like strawberries. All right, I have the edge here. It looks like this goes, maybe not. Oh, maybe I have the same problem. Aha, look at that. See, upside down. Okay, there we go. Now it matches. Okay, Let's open up the ink pad and get my red blend to go with this one. Again, light hand, make sure you're not going off the edge of the vellum at all. It should be a really quick way to color everything in once you get the hang of it. If I was gonna mass produce a bunch of these and I wanted them all colored in, I definitely think this is a method I would consider because it does go pretty fast. This one's gonna be a little darker because I got to talking and didn't tap it off, but that's okay. And this one we will make sure I have the light hand again. Line it up. There it is. Okay. And there's our 3 roses. And now we just have to do our 3 leaves or sets of leaves. Okay, here we go. This is a little easier because I just need to have it the right way and then line up the stem. I found when I was playing around with this, this was actually the easiest one to do because of the stem. And it goes really quick because it's so tiny. One in the middle here, and then one more off to the right. And then we can get to really stepping this card up a little bit. And this color is Parakeet Party. It's among the new in colors that that Stampin' Up! Just launched. All right, there we go. There are our 4 sets of leaves. So let's straighten all this out. And what I think I want to do, because there is a lot of white, I don't want to fill it in with ink because that's going to get really challenging. I don't really want to go in with markers or alcohol or regular because, again, the whole point of this technique was to show you how to quickly get these colored and get this card done, but it does need something. And one of the best ways to fill in the background really quickly is to add a embossing folder to your card. I used the Painted Textures embossing folder and see how it just kind of filled in all the white and added some texture to the card. Now remember, when we cut this, it is larger than even a quarter sheet of cardstock, so we need to cut it down, and I'd like a decent amount of this orchid layer to show behind. So let's trim that. So you're going to start with a 4 1/4 by a little bit under 5 1/2 or a little over, depending on whether you scored it or not. We're going to cut this down to 3 3/4 by 5. Now what I want to see here is how much am I going to lose? I think I'm going to cut a little less off on each side. So I'm just going to trim a little bit off of here so I don't lose all of my green there, and then go to 3 3/4 on this side. It's a nice thing about starting with a larger layer. You can kind of play around with what you're going to add in and what you're going to lose. Now this got a little bit of a seam from the embossing folder, so I definitely want to cut that down. I'm okay with this area here. I like that. So we're going to go straight. If I go straight for the 5 though, I do lose some of my green. So maybe I'm going to go a little bit taller here. I just want to make sure I get rid of that edge, which that will. And I've still got a little green towards the top. So let's do that. And there we go. All right, so now it's 3 3/4 by 5. So that's what you ultimately want to cut the colored layer down to. Then we're going to go ahead and assemble our card. So I'm going to take my liquid adhesive. I could also use Stampin' Seal or glue dots. You have all sorts of options. I just like to use the liquid glue. It goes fast. It's a little forgiving as you're putting your layers together. lets you get just a little bit of wiggle before everything is set. So there's my Orchid Oasis layer. And then I'm going to add my colorful and emboss layer. We're going to center that. There we go. And we're going to use dimensionals to add my greeting, and on the back of it, I'm just going to put a few dimensionals in the corners. Also going to put one right in the center so that it pops back up after it goes through the mail scanner. All of your mail runs through the post office and gets kind of squished as they're scanning it and deciding what its destination is, and you want to make sure that you have enough of the foam backing, if that's the way you decide, or the foam adhesives, if that's the way you decide to do this, so that it will pop back up. All right, I'm gonna go right here so I don't really block any of my images completely. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add a few of the Hexagon Adhesive-Backed embellishments. They come in 3 sizes. So I think what I'm going to do is just use 3 of the larger ones because I've got the space for it. When I do 3, I like to, I'm gonna kind of mirror this shape, and I want this to be, sorry if my head's in the way, I want this to be in the center. That's not exactly where I want it. Oh good, it's not totally stuck down. Just kind of eyeballing it here. There we go. All right. The other 2 will be easier to put down because I have that as a starting point. So now we'll go 1 to the right and then 1 to the left. Let's get it off without putting it. There we go. And 1 more. Oh, that's a little smaller. There we go. Come on, cooperate. All right, and there we go. So that is one version of this card. Let me share with you how else it can look. This is just a different version of the card. Here's what I changed. I used the opal rounds, which are not around anymore, but if you have them, any kind of pearly adhesive-backed embellishment will do, and that's what it looks like when it's a little bit darker. I used the same colors, but I stamped this in basic gray, so it was much more subtle as far as the lines were concerned. That's why they're not popping as much. And I also used a lot more ink when I was using my blending brushes, and that's why the color is more brilliant. So this just gives you a really good comparison of 2 different ways that you can use the same technique to make very different cards. I also used the Posy embossing folder, which is listed on your handout. I put all the products that were used on both versions on your handout. And the other change is that this element right here is just a little bit smaller. So this, instead of being 3 3/4 by 5, is 3 1/2 by 4 3/4. So if you're taking notes on dimensions, those are the 2 different styles of card. Thanks so much for watching. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Please click that subscribe button and by all means ring the notification bell so you know every time that I post a new video. If you wouldn't mind giving this video a like, I would greatly appreciate it, and I will see you again very soon. Have a crafty day.